Australian Cardinal George Pell, a towering figure of the Church both physically and intellectually, died last night from cardiac arrest. In 2017, Cardinal Pell left Rome to return to Australia to defend his innocence following charges of sexual abuse. After 404 days in prison, much of it in solitary confinement, he was acquitted, and in 2020 returned to Rome. Cardinal Pell previously had been Archbishop of Sydney and Melbourne. In 2014, he was appointed by Pope Francis to lead the Vatican's economy department. Earlier today, Pope Francis praised the Australian, saying he kept his faith even in the hour of trial. Joining us now from Rome is Andreas Thonhauser, EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief. Andreas, good to see you. What more have you learned about this unexpected news?
Well, of course, it's a sad day for us here in Rome and for the Church as a whole. Cardinal George Pell died yesterday from cardiac arrest, and this really came as a very sad surprise. Only last week, EWTN had Cardinal Pell as an important commentator on Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI's funeral live in the studio here in Rome on St. Peter's Square. In addition, we also interviewed him right after the passing of Benedict, as the German Pope and the Australian Cardinal were quite close. What we know so far is that Cardinal Pell had an operation, a hip replacement, yesterday in Salvator Mundi Hospital in Rome. This operation went actually well and he recovered quickly, but however, later in the evening, he then suffered from a heart attack. Father Joseph Hamilton, his personal secretary, told media that there will be an autopsy as well. Everyone around His Eminence is and was still in shock, and so far we know that there will be a funeral mass offered in Rome, and then Cardinal Pell will be brought to Sydney. He will be buried there in St. Mary's Cathedral in his old archdiocese.
Andreas, describe please for our audience the role Cardinal Pell played in Rome.
Well, Cardinal Pell really was a spiritual giant, I would say. And this is especially true for his past few years that he spent here in Rome. After his tragic and wrongful conviction and imprisonment, many came to regard him as a role model for a spiritual life. The way he bore the ultimately rejected accusations and then dealt with his time spent in prison was very impressive to many, including myself. He accepted his suffering really with dignity and with peace. Before that time in Australia, he was the prefect for the Secretariat of the Economy. He was the member of Pope Francis's Council of Cardinal Advisors and therefore one of the highest-ranking church officials in the world. And in this position, the former Archbishop of Sydney was committed to bring transparency to financial church affairs. And this was no easy task and, of course, was ended early because of the court trials in Australia and the wrong accusations. Cardinal Pell was also very outspoken on church topics, constantly defending church's teachings, bringing clarity to the discussion. Just as an example, last year he was very vocal about the German synodal path and the Synod of Synodality, and he even asked the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith to intervene and investigate statements from the head of the German Bishops' Conference, Bishop Betzing, and from Cardinal Jean-Claude Hollerich, who is of course the related general of the Global Synod. Both made statements suggesting that the Church would have to rethink its teachings on homosexuality. In this and many other cases, he reminded us that we need to rediscover the promises of Jesus and defend the deposit of faith. To him, following the dictates of a contemporary culture was never a real solution for the Church.
And Andreas, in our remaining moments here, just a few seconds, how will Cardinal Pell be remembered?
Well, he will primarily be remembered in line with his episcopal motto, I believe, Nolite temere, be not afraid. Following this motto, he fearlessly tackled corruption and promoted transparency. He went to Australia to face the charges wrongfully brought against him regarding child abuse. And then he returned to Rome, being an advocate for truth. Last year, it was also Cardinal Pell who followed our invitation here in Rome to celebrate the anniversary Mass for Mother Angelica's passing. He called her a nun who moved mountains and who, like him, was also not afraid of anything or anyone.
Andreas Thonhauser, EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief, thank you very much.